Welcome to In Her Voice. My name is Kelly Covert, and I am passionate about helping women live authentically by listening to their inner voice. Get ready to be inspired by women of all walks of life that have set aside their should-bes and not good enoughs and are standing in their true voice, the voice of wisdom that each and every one of us has inside. Hello, everyone. This is Kelly, and you are listening to In Her Voice. Thank you for joining me today. I have a really special guest on the show today. Her name is Monique Lang, and she was introduced to me by a mutual friend and someone who I hold very dear to my heart, my assistant, Lana, who writes the show notes for this podcast and who basically supports In Her Voice more than anyone that I know, and I'm so grateful for her. But she introduced me to Monique, who is local to me here in Syracuse, and Monique is just one of these special people that has a deep wisdom and a way about her that almost makes you feel like you change just because you're in her presence. I'm not kidding, you guys. So beautiful, so wise. I can't wait to share this interview with you from her. Let me read you her bio because not only is she wise, but she's a smarty pants. Monique Lang is a psychotherapist, teacher, writer, and healer. For over 35 years, she has worked with and helped individuals, groups, and communities. Trained in internal family systems, past life regression, EMDR, Gestalt, psychoanalysis, comprehensive resource model, Reiki, mindful practices, and shamanic techniques, Monique brings a depth of presence and gentleness to her work with people in her counseling practice, her teaching, her writing, and as a leader of workshops and vision quests. She has also, and now I'm paraphrasing because I can't even begin to do the tip of the iceberg when it comes to this, but she has taught at Columbia University School of Social Work. She's taught at the State University of New York at Stony Brook. She has worked at the Mercy College Department of Psychology. She has been a supervisor for third-year psychiatric residents at Westchester Medical Center, and she has also been a staff counselor at the Omega Institute for Holistic Studies. Monique knows what she's doing. And after our interview, I was so moved that I booked a session for myself with her. And oh my goodness, you guys, it was life-changing. I still think about the things that we talked about daily. And I'm so grateful for Monique and so excited to share her wisdom with you here on In Her Voice. So let's get right to that interview. Monique Lang, it's so exciting to welcome you to In Her Voice. Thank you for being here.
Oh, my pleasure.
I'm so excited to speak with you, and it's so lovely to connect with people who are local to me. And even though we've not met face to face, I feel like now we have no excuse not to. So we're going to have to make that happen. But I'm really excited to dive into this idea with you today of connecting with your core self, connecting with your inner core. And this is something that you as a therapist work with your clients and I'm sure yourself on all of the time. So I thought maybe we could start with, why don't you just tell everyone about the kind of work that you do and how you got to that work?
That's always a hard question, isn't it?
It is, I know.
So, I got to this work. I mean, I'm pretty old at this point, so I got to this work basically one foot in front of the other. You do one thing and that leads to the next, that leads to the next, that leads to the next.
Mm-hmm.
So I was very fortunate about 25 years ago to discover this new model of psychotherapy called internal family systems. I had already done some Gestalt and some meditation, and I was already a Reiki master. And but the internal family systems brought together all these modalities together with insight oriented therapy, so that what IFS does is it helps you connect to your own inner knowing. And different people do that differently. Some people do it through the body, some people do it through images. Um, I work with a lot of spiritual people, so they'll know through guides and helpers. So there is not one size fits all.
Mm-hmm. And so I'm curious about this in the internal family systems, because when I think of traditional therapy,
Mm-hmm.
I don't think of Reiki,
Right,
right? I don't think of energy work.
right.
And I think that in my knowing and my experience in traditional therapy, that piece seems to be very like noticeably absent.
Mm-hmm.
So can you talk about how you marry the two?
So I'm also a trauma specialist, and we all have trauma. There's big trauma and little trauma, and none of us has escaped little trauma, and many of us have not escaped big trauma.
Mm-hmm.
Trauma is actually held in the body. Peter Levine, who has a model called somatic experience, talks a lot about how what creates trauma is not the event, but the inability of the body to discharge the energy from the event.
Interesting.
So we have fight, flight, freeze. If you're fighting or fleeing, the likelihood that you will have trauma and that the event will get stuck in your system is slight. If you go into freeze, your nervous system is still activated. And so it gets stuck. It's like if you can, think of holding something for a very long time that's heavy and maybe uncomfortable. After a while, your hand will cramp. If you cannot release the cramping, then you get a medical condition, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's the same thing with emotions. So if you are in freeze and there is no way to release the physiological as well as the narrative of what happened, it gets stuck in the body. So by using Reiki, we can access the memory of the trauma and release it through both moving the energy out of the body and processing it as a narrative.
So it's talk therapy and energy therapy, if you will.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's so fascinating. Now, for those of my listeners who aren't familiar with Reiki, there might be a few. I think most of you guys know what that is, but can you just briefly explain what Reiki is?
Ouch. Um, it's it's a way of using universe. So I'm not a traditional by the book, actually anything. Uh,
Join the club, Monique.
yeah, I do it, but I do it this way. It's like cooking.
Yeah,
How can you cook by the book?
right.
So therapy is like cooking. And my clients actually say, could you use metaphors that have nothing to do with food? And like, no. So, um, so therapy, body work is very much like cooking. You take so back to Reiki. Reiki is a way of harnessing, channeling, for lack of a better word, energy that is all around us and focusing it in a specific way on parts of the body.
Mm. Mm-hmm.
And the body will then react and give us information. Now, traditional Reiki, I'm not cooking, um, by the book. In most traditional Reiki, you you channel this energy, you put it into the body, and the belief is that the body has a wisdom to do with that energy what it needs to do. I think that some of us also need help removing those stuck energies, and that's what I do. So I pull out the stuck energy and process it with the client. My most dramatic um, client was, and I was just started, is a woman I was do Reiking on, and I kept thinking, what's wrong with your knee? What's wrong with your knee? What's wrong with your knee? And I said to her, what's wrong with your knee? She says, I don't know. It's always hurting. Okay. So I started pulling out, and the way I do it is I say, allow any thoughts, feelings, memories, images, colors, whatever, to come out. And she had a memory of having been incested by her father, which she did not remember. And that knee would get stuck in the wall, against the
Oh.
wall. So all the memory of that trauma was stuck in her knee.
Mm. That's so powerful.
Yeah.
It's so powerful. And so when people are able to release the emotions,
Mm-hmm.
does that get them unstuck, so to speak?
Mm-hmm. You know, when you no longer have it, it's gone. I
Yeah.
mean, there's still, and this is where the narrative is important. It still needs to be processed a little bit.
Yeah.
You know, it's not a car wash.
So for so two questions in one here.
Okay.
As a therapist in your work, how do you help people process? What does that look like? And how can we learn how to do that without a therapist?
So, I mean, obviously I'm biased, right?
Of course.
I think it helps to have someone mirror, reflect, and ask the kind of questions that you would not ask yourself. And how do I do it? I just keep asking questions. Tell me more. So, in internal family systems, we believe that we have a core self. And you ask 97 internal family systems therapists the same question, and you get 97 answers.
Mm-hmm.
For me, our core self is the essence of who we are. It's our essence. And it is that which connects us to spirit and to cosmic energy, to energy. So for those of us who meditate, that point in meditation when you're fully yourself and fully not yourself is self.
Mm-hmm.
That liminal space.
Mm-hmm.
But when you're in that space, you can't do anything. You're just there, right? Which is a beautiful thing, but it's not overly helpful to manage your life. So parts develop to help us do life. And that's beautiful and necessary. We differentiate two types of parts. Parts are healthy parts, and other parts are what we call burdened. And the healthy part, so the difference, a healthy part comes home, there's no milk in the refrigerator, and goes, oh, no milk. Oh, well, I'll have my coffee black, or I'll go to the store and I'll get milk tomorrow, right? Not a big deal. A noting. A burden part will go, oh my goodness, there's no milk. I'm going to starve. It's 2 o'clock in the morning, drives 25 miles to the only convenience stores that has milk, buys 25 gallons and comes back. Because that part holds the memory, the trauma of having lived in a situation in which there wasn't enough food. So there are parts that hold trauma that continue to inform us on how to live our lives. I mean, it's obviously more complicated, right?
Of
But
course.
they continue to inform us how to live our lives in ways that are no longer necessary.
So here's a question for you about this. As someone who would consider themselves to be relatively healthy, like full of healthy parts, how do you recognize when there's certain parts of you that are burdened?
So if you have a burdened part, so burdened parts show up either emotionally or physically. For example, people who have, not all, but I'm making generalizations here. People who have stomach problems are often anxious. So you ask your body, what's going on? What am I anxious about? And then you work on the parts that holds the anxiety.
Yeah, I feel like our bodies have so much wisdom for us,
Right.
and it seems so simple, but yet all we have to do is ask.
Right.
How do we develop our hearing? Do you know what I mean? Like,
Yep.
how do we develop the hearing of our bodies?
We start paying attention. I mean, it sounds so mundane and simple, but most of us do not pay attention. I mean, I just had a situation in which I was overly tired. I did too much, right? Like really stupid. Took a red eye and then had a 9 o'clock session. What was I thinking? Right? Right. Not smart, right? So my higher wisdom said, cancel the session. This is fine. This client will be fine. Reschedule and go to bed. Right? My workaholic part said, just have another cup of coffee. And so I totally neglected my body saying, you're exhausted, just go to bed.
Yeah.
And we all do that. I'm hungry. Oh, I'll eat in an hour. Really?
Or I'm not hungry, but I'll eat anyway.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So it's really, this is where mindfulness comes in. It's really a practice of paying attention. So to bring it into the psychological, when we are not paying attention, the question is to ask, the part of me that is not giving me the permission to know what I know, like I'm exhausted or I'm hungry or I'm not hungry, how old is that part? When did this belief, this decision that I should not pay attention to what actually is going on in my body, when did I learn that? What were the circumstances? And it's really surprising, but people know instantly. Oh, I was 3, I was 5.
And it's almost as if they've made that a rule.
Right. Because the parts get stuck in time. Remember that old study about prisoners who were released and didn't know what to do?
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, we're all prisoners in that sense, where our circumstances change, but we don't know it. I have a client who's a multimillionaire. He is so afraid that he's not going to have enough money to eat because he grew up in terrible poverty.
Mm.
So this is how we get stuck when our young parts, I like to say, that they need an update. Then
Yeah.
they need to be brought up to date. And acknowledging the what was. It's true that this happened. And can you now let that young part? So we do a lot of imagery work. Can you imagine yourself as this 5-year-old? If you were to talk to that 5-year-old now, what would you say to her or him? So we do a lot of that.
Mm-hmm.
So it's teaching each person to become their own therapist, which is why I love this model.
I love it. It's so powerful.
Mm-hmm.
So, with this idea of the core self,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, what I heard you say is when we're in the full presence of that, there's not really much that we can do. But how do we connect there with the healthy parts of ourselves? How do we use the information that's stored in the core self? How do we access it? How do we put that into action?
So this is where I really like the Buddhist mindfulness teachings. It's really about being present with what is. I love what Tara Brach talks about, which is no matter what comes up, oh, and this too, with gentleness and lovingness. Oh, I feel sad. Yes, and this too. So when you bring understanding and compassion to whatever is coming, you're present. And when you're present, you're in self.
Oh, that is beautiful. That is beautiful. I mean, I think we talk about compassion, but not like this. Not like having compassion for where we are in each moment. I think so often as driven overachievers, it's always about like to the next thing, to the
Right.
next thing, or this is holding me back. And instead of, and yes, it might be holding you back, but instead of letting that be a fault, oh, and this too, feeling compassion for where you are right then, that's beautiful.
Mm-hmm. And then if you want to amp it up, where and how did I learn to not pay attention? Where and how did I learn to drive myself to exhaustion? No blame, curiosity.
What are some, I mean, so when you're teaching people this and in your own life, will you ask yourself these questions just throughout the day, or do you have a space and time for them each day? Do you journal? I'm just curious about the practice of this.
Mm-hmm. So I wish I could say that I do it all the time. I'd be lying. Um, because I've been doing it for so long, I am more present more of the time than I used to be.
Mm-hmm.
And I do have a mindfulness meditation practice, which is pretty daily consistent.
Mm-hmm.
And so, it's like building a muscle. The more you do it, the more it's available. So I always say to people, try with 3 minutes. Just stop for 3 minutes. And there's a zillion ways to meditate. There's the traditional close your eyes and watch your breath. You can look at a tree for 3 minutes and ask the tree to talk to you. That's a meditation.
Mm-hmm.
So it's really finding those ways within yourself There is no one way.
Yeah. I love that. I know for me, when I am in a daily practice or a almost daily practice of meditating, I feel so much more grounded and centered in
Mm-hmm.
my life. And still, it can be a challenge to come to that practice for whatever reason. And I think sometimes my expectation around meditation is what holds me back. Does that
So
make sense?
the may he or she who has not had this, please raise their hand. Really? So it's about having compassion
Right.
and understanding for that part that doesn't do it perfectly.
Mm-hmm.
And some days you're going to do it and others not. So, okay.
Yeah. Yeah. I think a lot of my listeners will resonate with this feeling of like, oh, I must be doing it wrong. Um, because sometimes I think when you come to meditation, you feel like at the end of your time, however long that's been, that it should be like magic.
Oh,
Do you know?
when you learn that technique, would you let me know?
Okay, that makes me feel so much better.
I love I love Pema Chodron, and she tells a story about she sat down to meditate and her mind was blah 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 blah, and she's like, oh, but I'm a Buddhist nun, and then she said to herself, oh, at least I was present enough to notice that I was chattering.
So good.
Right? So it's those kernels that I cultivate. There's no such thing as perfection. When I teach workshops and I do narratives and whatever, and I always say to people, you don't have to do it right and you can't do it wrong.
Mm. Say that again. That's so good.
You don't have to do it right and you can't do it wrong.
Yes.
Thank you. I learned that from my teacher, Ipupiara.
That is so good. I'm writing that down. You guys, you need to write this down. You don't have to do it right and you can't do it wrong. I feel like the only way to do it wrong is to not do it.
But even that isn't necessarily wrong.
Yes, but we're missing. But yes, you hear my hesitation, right? But then aren't we missing out though?
Well, it's again, if doing it is going to be more stressful than not doing it, don't do it. So it's like, people who go on a diet
Mm-hmm.
and then they have a piece of chocolate and they go, well, whatever. I,
Right.
right? I just had one piece of chocolate. I might as well go and buy the biggest chocolate bar and eat it all at once, right?
Right.
Well, no. So you go, oh, I had a piece of chocolate. Okay, done. Tomorrow I won't.
Mm-hmm.
So it's about, because you don't want to bring rigidity to ease.
Yeah, it's almost like that's the opposite of ease.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
So I love how shamans think, and they say, you set the intention, and you set a powerful intention, and you try to live by the intention, and life happens.
Mm-hmm. Do you have a practice of setting a daily intention for yourself?
It's not daily, they tend to be periodic.
Uh-huh.
So for the last year, I think, my intention every day has been to be kind.
Mm, I love that. I love that. I feel that intentions are so powerful because it's almost like they set the tone. They set the tone for where our thoughts go and for what we think about first and for our direction. It's like, putting like the intention becomes like the address in the GPS.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
And even if
But
you go
keep
off
it-
route, it will pull you back. It will pull
Right.
you back to that place where you want to be.
Right. And to be gentle with yourself about it. I had a situation yesterday. So, now I'm not perfect. I was at the supermarket and I was in a rush, blah, 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 blah. And so I wasn't kind. I wasn't mean. I just wasn't kind.
Mm-hmm.
And I immediately noticed it.
Mm.
So that's the intent. And so I apologize. I'm sorry. I'm rushed. So it doesn't mean that there's perfection. It's noticing.
Yeah. Yeah. I think there's so much room for us to have grace with ourselves when it comes to being imperfect people, because all of us are that. All of us are imperfect. All of us have our days
Right.
where we're not on and where we don't make the best choices. And just when we begin to have grace for ourselves in our imperfections, I find it so much easier to have grace with other people's imperfections.
Exactly. Because we tend to treat others by the same standards that we treat ourselves.
Yeah.
And I had a teacher who used to say, there's no such thing as perfection. And once you reach perfection, you die.
Who wants that?
Well, that's another story.
Right.
But, there's no such thing. What is perfect?
Yeah.
No such thing.
Yeah.
So it's intention. So I like the working with intention as opposed to making a resolution.
Yeah. I 100% agree with the difference of those two words. Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, Monique, 30 minutes has gone by so fast, and I want to make sure that I ask you the question that I like to ask all of my guests. And that is, in your life currently, what is your inner voice saying to you, your core self? What is it saying to you?
So it's interesting because I just came back from Ecuador and I had a long talk with a tree who said to me, just be.
I think that is good wisdom for all of us right now, to find the moments to just be. And I just want to thank you, Monique, for coming on the show today, for sharing your deep wisdom,
Thank you.
for sharing for sharing your imperfect self with us, that I'm so grateful for. Thank you. Thank you.
Well, thank you. Thank you. This was a delight.
Oh my goodness. And if my listeners would like to get in touch with you, I think that you have a blog or a podcast. Can you share a little bit about how they can learn more about what you have to offer?
I don't have a blog. I am not on Facebook. I am not on Instagram. I know. What can I tell
Goodness.
you? I know.
We have to meet you face to face in order to experience you.
But I do have a website. It's moniquelcsw.com. And if you just Google me, I'm kind of like all over the place.
Perfect. Well, we'll put the link to your website for sure.
And on my, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
And on my website, there's a place where you can contact me.
Wonderful. And I look forward to meeting you face to face and hugging your neck sometime soon.
That sounds wonderful.
Wonderful.
I look forward to that.
Thank you so much, Monique.
And thank you to Anna.
Oh, I really, really hope that resonated with you guys. and that you were really just able to listen to some of those wise words. I just got to say them again because, oh my goodness, I loved this statement that she said, oh, and this too. How that just allows us to be present. Oh, and this too. And another thing that I wrote down that I really have taken away is you don't have to do it right and you can't do it wrong. What great lessons. Oh my gosh. The go listen to it again. Go listen to it again. So good. I would like to say to each and every one of you, thank you. 2018 has been an amazing year. It's been a challenging year. It's been a wonderful year. It's been a hard year. Just like life, there's always this duality, right? Challenges and things that are easy, wonderful things and things that are hard. And that's what makes life amazing. And that's what makes life, which feels so imperfect, perfect. You are amazing. You are wonderful. You are here for a reason. And I want to let you know that I have something really exciting coming up in mid-January. Actually, I think it's going to begin January 14th. I am doing another 5-day journaling challenge because it's been a while and I'm really feeling moved by my own inner voice to share something with you on inspired potential. So we're going to be doing 5 days of journaling together around the topic of potential. And if you are interested in that, I encourage you to head on over to my newsletter and get signed up, to my website, and get signed up. And you can find the link to that at kellycovert.com/newsletter. You can click on it right in the podcast app that you're listening to. Make sure that your name is on my newsletter, and I'm going to be sending information out to everyone on the newsletter on how to get registered for my upcoming 5-day journaling challenge on inspired potential, which of course will be free. So don't miss out on that. I hope that you guys have a wonderful week. I hope you have a wonderful holiday if you're listening to this at the holiday time. And I want you to remember, you matter. You, yes, you are worthy.